This is Ken Shamrock, and you're with the WGD Weekly. Steve and the Scum. Hey, rock out pro wrestling.
Hey there, all you savages. Welcome back to a very special edition of Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly's podcast, WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. My name is Steve. Alongside me, as always, the Scum. As you probably heard right now, our recent interview with Ken Shamrock gained some real national attention, along with a lot of his tweets and some pretty incredible replies from not only the internet wrestling community, but even Dana White had a lot of very interesting things to say about Ken Shamrock and an attempted return. So we decided it was only fair to have Ken back on our show to give him an opportunity to maybe rebut any comments, maybe clarify some of the things he said or mentioned the last time he was on. Pretty incredible stuff, Scum.
Absolutely, Steve. The last show that we did with Ken, it came out probably about a week and a half ago, like you said, went worldwide. I mean, we're stunned at the response. People were all over it. Some people jumping behind Ken and his tweets, and some people, you know, obviously you're going to have your opinion one way or another. But I think the shock that was heard around the world, Steve, was it's like I've been blackballed from wrestling. And I think people want to know exactly what he meant by that. And I think that people want to hear more about what he was saying. He touched briefly on a possible return to WWE, touched briefly on a possible return to TNA. So, like you said, it's only fair. We do what we can for our listeners. We appreciate our followers. We appreciate everybody that gave us a listen with the last special edition with Ken. So we're bringing him back. We're going to talk to him about those things. We're going to talk to him, like you said, about some of the pointed comments from Dana White and some of the stuff going on in the MMA world involving Ken lately. I mean, the guy's all over the place lately, Steve.
You know, we have a credo, I guess you would call it, that we don't get into too much about the current product. And folks, don't get us wrong here. This is a current event. This is certainly something that is relevant when we talk Glory Days of Professional Wrestling due to the people that are involved in it. But what we will give you is some of the best guests, like we always say, from the Glory Days of Professional Wrestling, Ken Shamrock being exactly that. So we're very happy to have him back on. I know he's going to join us in just a few moments, so we'll take this time really quickly. And Scum, you mentioned this this past Sunday on the show with Mark Miro, that this isn't an interview about how did Ken get his start, how did he get into the wrestling business. Folks, if you haven't heard that already, look it up on iTunes. There's a great interview with Steve and the Scum with Ken Shamrock. We go over his whole entire professional wrestling career. We kept MMA out of it due to the fact that, we're a wrestling program. We certainly concentrate on the world of professional wrestling. An extensive UFC career, an extensive MMA career all over the world. Of course, back in the days, just before the Attitude Era, in the early 90s when the UFC kind of just came out, there were two names that kind of stood out more than anybody else at the time. That was Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie. And still to this day, when you think Ken Shamrock, a lot of fans still think mixed martial arts.
Absolutely, Steve. I mean, probably more so than think pro wrestling, I would say. I mean, the guy is a legend. He's a UFC Hall of Famer. And again, like you said, our usual Sunday programming that this week will feature Mark Miro. So be sure and tune into that. But we usually run through the classic moments in the careers of our guests in the world of professional wrestling. Hence the term special edition. We want to follow up on a big-time topic that, yeah, he is a classic performer in professional wrestling. He's a former Intercontinental Champion. He's a former King of the Ring. He was a member of the corporation. He was a huge part of the Attitude Era, feuded with Vader, had great matches with Bret Hart, with Shawn Michaels. You can't dispute the man's involvement in wrestling, but right now, there's a difference between focusing on the current events in wrestling every week and bringing a classic performer that we hit a hot button with, a hot button topic, and following up on it, and that's what we're doing here. And to be honest with you, I know you, as well as myself, are big fans of Ken Shamrock. Hey, maybe what he has to say gets the word out there, and maybe it helps Ken Shamrock. Maybe you wind up seeing him back on Impact, back on Raw. Who knows?
Certainly the opportunity is there, but what surprises me, Scum, and like you said, we do focus on the professional wrestling aspect of people's careers, but it's very hard to not discuss or at least get Ken Shamrock's opinion on some of the recent comments that Dana White has to say. Now, I'm sure that somehow or another, Dana White, along with the guys that, I believe he's a third owner of UFC. If I know the story correctly, he and two brothers bought into that company when the original owner was, in financial troubles, bought the company away. Now, I am sure of one thing, and that is that Dana White at one point in his life has made money off the name Ken Shamrock. So it's very interesting to have heard his recent comments, and I'm very interested as to what Ken Shamrock will say in return.
Absolutely, Steve. And going against the grain, like we said in the first interview, we weren't going to touch on the MMA career because we're a wrestling program. However, if you do follow Ken on Twitter and you've been up to everything that's going on with him, the whole thing has been intertwined. He's been all over the place. Yeah, there's been his messages to WWE Nation, get behind me, let your voice be heard, bring Ken Shamrock back. Yeah, that's been out there, but it's also been out there in between those posts with the comments of Dana White, with the comments involving him, involving his brother, involving Tito Ortiz, involving a number of MMA guys. So being that it's current, being that it's us trying to stay on top of this subject, while it's hot, while he's all over the place, you really couldn't not touch on the MMA part of it.
Oh, you have a point there. That is for sure. Now, we're only a few minutes away here from Ken Shamrock joining us for the special edition of WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. Leave us your opinions. Leave us your opinions on our Facebook page, WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. If you follow us on Twitter, we're at WGD Weekly. Leave us your thoughts on what you think about Ken Shamrock. I will tell you this, Scum, shortly after our interview hit, and shortly after some of these tweets were made a couple weeks back, our YouTube channel went through the roof as far as views goes on Ken Shamrock's interview. So I know that his side of the story has been out there, but one of the main reasons why we have him back on the show is to allow him that opportunity to elaborate on some of the things that he said. Because again, we've said this from the beginning of our show here, is that we're not the dirt sheets. We're not throwing around loosely opinionated ideas that we try to make into fact. These are actual words that have come out of these characters' mouths, and I think that it is only apropos that they have the opportunity to elaborate and further describe what they were talking about.
Sure thing, Steve. And again, exactly what Ken said there. He said in our last interview, he told us that I've been begging for somebody to give me an explanation why I'm not being considered to at least be part of the Hall of Fame party or to get invited to some of the events that are going on. And he was speaking of WWE. Then came the big line. I've been pretty much blackballed, and I don't know why. Well, here you go. People, obviously, that hit a button with people. Obviously, people were interested in that comment. Here's a chance to find out what exactly he meant by that.
That is absolutely correct. And as you say it, Scum, we got Ken Shamrock about to call in with us now. Without further ado, folks, we're going to take you right to our interview with Ken Shamrock. Thanks so much again for joining us at WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. Ken Shamrock coming right up.
This is the Total Package with Lex Luger, and you are listening to WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum.
All right, folks, we got Ken Shamrock on the line with us. Ken, thanks so much for joining us again here at WGD Weekly.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, Ken, it seems like a lot has happened on the heels of our last chat as you were all over the place, all over the internet. It seems like you can't see a wrestling or an MMA website without your name on it recently, and for the most part, I think you would agree that the reception, the response from the fans of both of these, in both of the worlds, MMA and wrestling, they're there rallying behind you. So let's get right down to the business here. We want to thank you for coming back with us here at WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum, and jump right into a comment that you made the last time you visited our show. And, this kind of really what got the ball rolling in the internet wrestling world and the internet wrestling community is you stated that you felt in some way or another that you had been blackballed by the wrestling industry and that you couldn't get any answers from anybody. Now, since that resonated so widely and so loudly across the internet, we wanted to start out by asking you to explain exactly what you meant by saying that you felt that you were blackballed from the wrestling industry.
Well, I had put out my feelers. I had actually talked to even Shane McMahon. He put a call in. They weren't interested. And I felt like even with the Hall of Fame, the things that went on with that I was never invited to it. I was never a part of it. I thought I had a pretty intricate part in changing the face of wrestling. When I was able to ref the match with Bret Hart and Stone Cold, it changed the tide of wrestling. I was in all the pay-per-views. and all the house shows. I was always on every show, and I thought I made a pretty good impact and helped change pro wrestling. Not by myself, but I mean definitely I was a part of it. And that attitude era, and yet there's no recognition towards me or about me, and just a little bit disappointed. You know, I feel for the guys in the UFC who helped open the UFC. I'm obviously getting blackballed there by the UFC, and the guys like Kevin Rozier and Zane Frazier and Gerard Godot and the guys that open up the UFC. Nobody ever mentions them, and so now I'm kind of feeling on both sides, like, you know, here the guys that help do these kinds of things. If a promotion or somebody in that promotion decides that they don't like an individual, then they get to make up the rules, and the fans don't get to have a say in it at all. The fans just basically have to sit there and take it. Because I know, talking to a lot of fans, they do appreciate what I've done in both sports and would really like to see me get some appreciation. But yet the people that either one have a problem with me or don't like me feel like they don't have to listen to the fans, and that the fans don't have a say, and that they just need to shut up and keep paying for their tickets.
You know, honestly, Ken, it's very ironic that you said that. We had a discussion this past week on our show with those words actually being spoken between myself and the Scum, is basically getting force-fed angles and force-fed certain performers on the current product that I think a lot of fans are actually getting turned off by that. But we'll move on here. I wanted to ask you a little bit more. Now, you mentioned speaking to Shane McMahon. Now, we all know his brother-in-law, Triple H, seems to have a major say as the COO of the company. And, you know, you have mentioned previously with us on Twitter and again today, you know, one name that you feel in some way has, you know, possibly been the reason for that lack of response from the WWE in particular, is that it was Triple H. So explain, you know, your thinking on this for everyone. You know, could you tell us in the WWE universe, you know, why specifically would you say that there, you know, is there some bad blood there between you two? And is there an incident or a specific incident that you can recall that occurred that would make, you know, yourself and Hunter still kind of have a little bit of heat, so to speak, and maybe cause this issue where they're not interested in maybe bringing you back?
Yeah, exactly. I would. I'd like to clarify that, too. There was a guy named Mark Henry. He was a strongman. He was in the locker room, and there was a few guys involved, and Hunter was one of them, that put shit in his sandwich. And I told him. So I think Hunter... he didn't like me for that. And I don't think Hunter liked me for the fact that when I first came in, that Vince put me over on him, and I was very, very appreciative of him doing that. I even mentioned to him that I understand the position. You know, he's been here a long time. You know, I do understand. You know, and I was that with everybody. I was truly understanding that I was a new guy coming in that hadn't put in my dues, and I was getting pushed, and I understood that, but I was only doing what I was asked to do. And so what Vince did with me was what Vince did with me, but yet I still tried to apologize and help everybody understand that I do understand where their position is, and I do see their point. But I think that, you know, Hunter had a hard time dealing with that, especially me being a real badass anyways, and there's nothing he could do about it. And then, opening my mouth to try and protect another human being. I think there's a ribbing and there's having fun, and then there's things where you cross over the line. And in my opinion, I thought that they had crossed over the line in that incident, and so I said something.
Sure. Well, that's certainly could be considered crossing a line there. I mean, no doubt about that. That being said, let's stay on the possibility of somewhere there being a WWE return for you. We tossed around some scenarios on our show with you last time, and some possible opponents. And the reason I bring it up is on your Twitter account when you had called out, WWE Nation, let your voice be heard. It was a heck of a response. A lot of people were behind you, just like you said. The fans. You said you've spoken to some. We've heard the same from people that listen to the show and stuff. There's a lot of people that want to see Ken Shamrock back on WWE TV. So, I'd like to touch on some of those. If you did have a comeback, some possible opponents that we threw around, and that you would work with. The first, obviously, with everything that's going on that we would come to mind, would be Triple H. I mean, given what you just said and the tried and true formula of believability and reality, like you had said you brought to WWE when you first came in or helped to bring there, that is a big selling point in wrestling. So even though there's some bad blood there, would you be open, and how do you think a Shamrock Triple H feud would play out today? And the other name that we keep hearing people saying that would be obvious as well, with two UFC legends from two eras colliding, would be a program with you and Brock Lesnar. I mean, I can't see how those wouldn't be big money matches. What are your thoughts on possibly returning to face either Triple H or Lesnar?
Well, listen, I've always said I'll take anybody, anywhere, anytime, any place, and I will. And when it comes to Hunter, I would love to get in the ring with him and show him what it's like, and help him understand that there is a lot of people in this world that have a lot of natural ability and a lot of natural talent, and just because you don't like them doesn't mean it isn't so. So I would love to get in the ring with him and show him exactly who I am and what I'm about. And as far as Brock's concerned, listen, Brock came into MMA. He did a good job. I have always respected him. I thought they used him wrong. I thought he should have had a little grace period time to really help absorb what he was getting into. Instead, they threw him right in the top. He still held his own, but he could have been one of the greatest ever if they would have just groomed him and brought him up slowly. But they wanted to make the money fast, and I know Brock wanted to make the money fast. But as a person who's a manager or a promotion, you have to look at the longevity of a person and don't try and eat him up real quick and then throw him out. Now, Brock says he was hurt or he had this injury or this problem. Maybe so. But the bottom line is this. They used him wrong. They should have taken it slow, and they should have brought him up slow. He could have been one of the greatest ever. If I get in the ring with Brock Lesnar, obviously I think everybody understands. I came from the bare-knuckle days, from the NHB days, not MMA where it's watered down. I come from the hardcore days where you fight 4 times in one night, bare-knuckle, no rules, no time limit. If I get in the ring with Brock Lesnar, I will show him exactly who I am and why I've been the very first champion in MMA, bare-knuckle, no time limit, the true badass.
Sure. So, again, you would agree that either of those would be big money if you were back in WWE, though, correct?
Well, only if WWE, and I'm talking WWE as being in Hunter, only if these guys would open their eyes and stop being prima donnas and stop flipping their hair back. Oh, he cut his off. He can't flip it back anymore. But and stop looking in the mirror all the time trying to make sure their makeup's on straight. And start bringing in some guys like myself who don't worry about what they look like. They only worry about what they look like when they're beating on somebody.
Sure. Valid point. Well, moving on, when we were last with you, speaking about the other organization, TNA, we also touched on you being their first champion, and, you had said Jeff Jarrett had brought you back in there back in 2002. He's certainly still a part of the company behind the scenes, working in some capacity with President Dixie Carter. So have you reached out to Jeff, who you worked with in the past and who had contacted you in any way about a TNA return? And if so, was there any response? And are you familiar at all with Dixie Carter? I mean, she certainly hasn't shied away from bringing other MMA stars, Tito Ortiz and Rampage Jackson come to mind pretty recently. So if anything, have you reached out to Jeff or Dixie, and did you get anything back there?
I haven't reached out to Jeff. I know Jeff had reached out and asked if I needed help with my Twitter trying to get verified because for some reason I can't seem to get verified. But it is what it is. People know it's me, and it is Shamrock Ken at Twitter. So I've even taken a picture and shot it, and I didn't have to do that, but I did because I wanted people on Twitter to know it's me and not be held out by some political agenda of reasons why they're not verifying me. I for some reason that seems to be going on a lot around me with being disrespected, not being given the due respect that I think that I deserve and that the fans think I deserve. When it comes to UFC, 20-year anniversary is coming up, and not one mention from the UFC, which I made them millions and millions of dollars. I saved their ass from closing the doors twice. And yet there is no respect being paid this direction, other than threatening me that they're going to come after me for $175,000. This is the kind of mentality things that I have to deal with these people. Hunter Hearst, who is in the WWE, who I have never, ever said anything bad about, but has problems with me for whatever reason it is, which the ones I've kind of explained, but due to nothing that I have done other than try to be a human being. And so, you know, for whatever reasons these things are happening, I truly leave it up to whatever God decides it goes, whatever direction it goes. But I promise you, I will not stop being the person that I am. I am a tough guy. I've trained myself over years to earn the credentials that I have. No one has given them to me. And yet, and on top of being a tough guy and training to be that and getting the deserved credit that I deserve by working hard, I am also a human being, and I want people to know that what I do in the ring, I do not do outside the ring. I am a human being, a humanitarian. I love animals. I love people. I love my fans. Well, when I get in the ring, I turn on a switch, and I become something other than a human being.
That is some fantastic stuff. And now, folks, keep in mind, and we touched on this prior to Ken joining us here today at WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum. Before the Dan Severns, before the Don Fries, before the Tito Ortiz, there was two men that stood alone at the top, at the apex of what was mixed martial arts at the time. Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie, two guys that kicked the living daylights out of each other long before the glitz and glamour of what you see now in the Octagon and the monthly pay-per-view. So Ken Shamrock touching on some really good points here. Like he said, his Twitter handle, @ShamrockKen. We've been talking about his career in pro wrestling, trying to make a return. Scum, you just mentioned TNA. We're going to touch on TNA here real quick. Ken, now there's a couple of guys that are currently on the roster in TNA who I know you're very familiar with. That's a guy named Tito Ortiz and another guy that you may know very well named Kurt Angle. I know Kurt Angle, he took your move, he took the ankle lock, an Olympic champion, another legit tough guy. Of course, the champion being AJ Styles at the time, at the current point. You know, give us your thoughts on possibly working with Kurt Angle, AJ Styles, or, you know, Tito or Rampage or anybody like that. Is that something that you can see drawing a lot of money?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You know, Tito beat me 3 times already, so, you know, for me to get a rematch with him in pro wrestling, it would be fun to have. But, you know, also, too, with talk about Kurt Angle, the one thing that I would love to have with him is an ankle lock match, whereas you can't win any other way than before you put an ankle lock on one or the other. And let's find out who the real, I mean, obviously everybody knows that I'm the real deal, but let's find out who is the real master of the leg locks, who can put an ankle lock on the other one and make him tap out, and then we'll truly know who does it the best.
That would be unbelievable. What a great idea. And again, now in an age of professional wrestling with things hanging off of poles and 6-sided rings and tight ropes across the top of the ring, let's get back to the nitty-gritty, get into a submission only with that ankle lock contest. A tremendous idea. We wanted to touch on the current buzz surrounding you in that MMA world as well, and I know you touched on it real quickly there, Ken. But before we do, let's get back into just a couple more things in the world of wrestling. On the heels of our release of the interview of our first interview with you, part 1, the WWE just released a Where Are They Now piece on WWE.com where they spoke with you, and it seemed to be pretty much, it mirrored the exact history we ran through with you in our first, in our first episode. So regardless of that, there was no mention on their site or that piece at all of your recent calling out to the fans and, the tweets and of course all the internet posts that followed. There's that desire, like you're mentioning here now, to come back with the company. So how did, the WWE.com piece come about? Who contacted you? Did you have a chance to tell them, the things that you're telling us now? Or were there any other outlets out there? And if so, what was the response there? And if not, was there a reason you didn't mention that desire while you did that interview?
No, I mentioned it. I told them that I wanted to come back, and it would be nice to come back. And that was one of the things that interested me in doing the actual interview. But it wasn't mentioned. And I mentioned it one time so that they had it in the interview. And I didn't want to, make it sound like that I'm desperate and that, I got to have this. But in the same sentence, I want people to know that I do want to come back. I know this was a piece about where are they now, so I didn't want to kind of, blow that up and mess up that piece, because that's really what it was, is people wanting to know where I am now. And so we did that piece, but at the end of that piece, I said, I would love to be able to come back and complete my journey, which is I have been champion in everything I've ever done. I've done probably 7 or 8 different organizations. Every organization I've been a part of, I became world champion. 7 different organizations. And the only one I hadn't become world champion in, but I was tag team champion, Intercontinental champion, Rookie of the Year, King of the Ring. I had accomplished everything but the world title. And I believed that I would have had my opportunity to challenge for that belt, but after about 2 years, I started going in the other direction. Like I wasn't getting the shot with The Rock. I thought the whole setup for me and The Rock for the Intercontinental title belt was for The Rock to move up, go against Stone Cold, possibly beat Stone Cold or not beat Stone Cold. Then I would move up and I would start getting into that mix. But instead, I lost the Intercontinental title and I started going backwards. And so then I made a decision, well, if I'm not going to get that shot and I'm not going to keep moving forward, then maybe I should go back into MMA because at least when I go into MMA, I can go in there and I can, I've been a champion there and I can try to go and capture the belt again. So it just felt like, kind of my spilt milk. I know that's what it sounds like, but I didn't get the shot that I thought I should have. But then again, I look around, a lot of those other guys didn't get their shot either. So it is what it is. You can't cry too much about it, but I am making this statement that I believe that the opportunity should be presented to me to get back in the ring with the WWE or, even TNA. I mean, I don't think that's a problem. But WWE is where I made my mark. It's where I became Rookie of the Year, King of the Ring, Intercontinental Champion, all in a 2.5-year time span. And I wasn't given the opportunity to really go after that belt. And I thought, if I get the opportunity again, I was completely focused on that to try and do what I have to do to get that shot. And even the fans are screaming out there, at least put him back in the ring and let's see what he can do. But, this is the thing that pisses me off about this sport, the MMA and WWE. It seems like, because NFL, baseball, all the big 4 sports all have to listen to the fans. They do have to listen to them, because if they don't listen to what the fans say, the fans are smart enough to go, you know what, we won't buy your damn tickets then. But it just seems like in this fighting world, the wrestling and the fighting world, it's almost like the fans have to almost be reminded, listen, you guys are the most powerful thing in the world. As a group, you can bankrupt anything in the world if you want. All you got to do is go, we're done, we're not doing this anymore, and pull all yourselves out of there, and guess what? That company's over, finished, done. That's how powerful the fan base is. It's a very powerful thing, and I'm the one right now that's going to try and get the fans to understand that they have all the power.
No, and you certainly do have a lot of fans that are behind you, Ken, that's for sure. And you are entitled to that statement. To be honest with you, when I read through that WWE.com piece, I spoke with Steve. He read it as well. The first thing that we both thought of was how, after speaking with everything, there's no way that he didn't say to them that he would like to come back and get that shot. And it wasn't in there. So that's why we were asking that. It just seemed very peculiar with everything that you've been saying. I knew there was no way that hadn't been put in there, but
no, I said it.
That's what we figured, for sure. Yeah. So moving along, before we touch on the MMA buzz that's been surrounding you lately, just wanted to throw one more possibility out there that we hadn't heard in the last time. But in looking back, I know that you did a little bit of business probably about 10 years ago with Ring of Honor. Now, they have a national TV deal. They present a real hard-hitting, believable product that would seem to be right up your alley. I mean, a veteran presence that's been there, that's made his mark, could certainly be a great influence on the young up-and-comers there, in addition to an actual marquee name. Like you said, you've been an Intercontinental Champion, you've been a King of the Ring, you can still go, you're in great shape, and how familiar are you with Ring of Honor's product, and would that ever be a path that you would consider taking a comeback attempt at presented?
Ring of Honor is extreme, and I probably one of my favorite matches I ever saw there. And like I said, I don't remember the name of the guys, but it was unbelievable. I mean, it was almost like Stone Cold and Bret Hart when they had their I Quit match, and I was refereeing it. It was a lot like that, but these guys were a lot smaller, And they were just nonstop, and I saw that, and then I saw the other matches in there, and I was like, now these guys got something special. If they can just get this out there, it was a different brand, you know, it was definitely a different brand. It was more like in Japan where they had the catch as catch can. And I was really intrigued with that, but at the time I was definitely involved with the UFC and also with the WWE at that time, so I really didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to even go and see more of it or be a part of it. But, you know, with my schedule now, you know, I've got some things that I'm doing, but I'm a self-employed individual, and I'm a self-made man. And, you know, when I say self-made, you know, obviously I'm not saying I did it myself because I didn't. A lot of people helped me get to where I'm at. But, you know, I have opportunities to be able to move things around and do what I want to do.
Sure. Well, again, that being said, I mean, you'd have to agree that you were saying if they could just get it out there. Ken Shamrock could certainly help get it out there. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, I would say your name is bigger than any that's there right now. And like you said, with that hard-hitting style and the extreme, the word that you used, I would think that not only would it be a wealth of knowledge to be passed on to some of the younger guys there, but I would think that you would fit right in like a glove there.
No, and like I said, I'm definitely open to any of those options. You know, the thing that I had seen in my head was either I really would love to have the opportunity, but I think the one thing that I did lack was the experience. And so I thought to myself, if I was going to go back and I was going to compete for that world title, you know, obviously I want Hunter's head, but I'd like to be against him. But I would love to bring in somebody like Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels or Stone Cold Steve Austin as a guy who would work my corner, who would help give me that experience that they have worked so long and so hard to get, and share it with me and pass it on to me, and work my corner so that I don't get screwed like I did against, you know, when I was running for the Intercontinental title. You know, all 3 times I got screwed out of that title when I was facing The Rock. If I had those guys in my corner, that would not have happened, and then I would be moving forward, going against Stone Cold for that title.
Sure. Well, again, that would be even bigger to have someone like a Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels there with you, Stone Cold. That would be unbelievable.
Just watching my back, you know what I mean? Because they've seen all the tricks and all the dirty things in wrestling. I mean, if they were in my corner when I faced The Rock, and they would have seen that coming out with the brass knuckles coming out of his trunks. They'd have seen the chairs coming. I would have had backup. I would have had somebody there in my corner that knew all those dirty tricks, and then I would have won that chance to move on and face Stone Cold.
Sure, absolutely. Well, that's unbelievable stuff that we've hit on here from the world of wrestling. So real quick, before we got just a few more questions for you, Ken, we appreciate you being here on WGD Weekly, and we want to move on to some of the stuff that's been going on in the world of mixed martial arts. A few of the comments of recent stuff that, unless people have been sleeping for the last few weeks, they couldn't have missed on Twitter and everything. I mean, we wanted to touch quick on some of the comments that you started touching on earlier, made by Dana White. He's directed at you, at your brother Frank, at Tito Ortiz, at multiple legends in the Ultimate Fighting world. Where does this come from? That statements about money and such like that. I mean, if you would give our listeners your feelings on those recent comments, and, you know, what I would think at some point he had at least be an associate of yours, Dana White. So, I mean, where does all this come from?
Well, well, first of all, it comes from me doing interviews. When I do an interview and I get asked questions, I basically speak my opinion. Whether it's right or wrong, it's my opinion. And so when I do that, then Dana White comes out and he starts calling me names. And so then when he calls me names, then I go back to him and then I start pointing out facts of things that he's done. So that way I don't get into a slinging mud contest. And then he comes back even more with stuff saying now he's going to attack me. He's going to, just like he does Logan, I'm going to shut you down. You never work in this town again. You never work in the UFC again. You're a scumbag. Then he starts attacking me personally about how he's going to destroy me or what he's going to come after. And it's almost like people, and all of a sudden you'll hear it, he'll just stop, right? And then I know what's happening is he gets going, and then people behind in the company are saying, hey, you need to shut your mouth, you know? The things you're saying are getting us in trouble. And so then all of a sudden he starts to calm down, and he doesn't say anything. But The bottom line is this. I don't do things to attack Dana White. Whenever I do an interview, we could be called for a year and a half. This is what I tried to explain to his attorneys, is that every time that this kind of thing happens, it doesn't originate with me. I mean, they may say it does. You know, when I'm asked a question, they ask me about fighter pay, I speak my opinion. When I do that, Dana White comes back and starts calling me names. That's where the problem starts. Because if they would just start talking, if they want to prove me wrong or have a discussion about fighter pay in a civilized manner, then, I'm all for it. I'm sure the fans are all for it. But when you attack me and start calling me names, then I've got no other position other than to be like you and call you names, or I can take the high road and just stick to the facts, which are, I'm not a scumbag, and I hate those things you say to me, but the fighter pay, there is a problem. And the facts are right there in front of everybody. When you got people that fight in the main event and they can't pay their bills. And you got a guy like Gary Goodrich who has brain damage. No one's ever paid him attention. You got Kevin Rozier, who was in the very first UFC. He's in a retirement home. Nobody knows that. Nobody helps him. Nobody cares about him. These are the type of things I'm saying. And this is to the extreme. But I'm talking about just right now with these guys fighting now. If I made $2 million, people will go, oh, my God, man, you made a lot of money. Yeah, I did. But, I was lied to about how much it was being paid out, because if you look at, I made $2 million in a span of an 8-year period, you look at what they made, right? I was negotiating from what they told me. The numbers were not correct. So if I turn and look at that $2 million and look at what they really made off of those fights, I'm looking at somewhere between $200 million, $300 million. And I didn't even make 0.5% on what they pulled in off of what I did. So that becomes a problem now. Now you're looking at a business deal where you have all the facts to negotiate a good deal. People go, well, yeah, but that's what you signed. That's a contract you signed, and you agreed to it. Yeah, I agreed to sign to that. But at the same time, when I agreed to it, they didn't let me know all the facts about what was being brought in so I can negotiate from a strong position.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And again, now, dealing with, with wrestling promoters, with fight promoters, there's always been that aura of shadiness. And again, you have to look at things through the eyes of almost like a commission-based salesman. As if you're getting paid, 1% on every $100, you're really not making a lot of money, especially if the guys above you are into the tens of millions and you're only seeing a very small portion of that when you and the rest of the fighters are bringing in, the gate. Basically, you're the one putting asses in seats, whether it be wrestling or whether it be mixed martial arts. So it's a very interesting statement there, Ken. And now we're talking about promoters. Vince McMahon is certainly one of the biggest promoters to ever get into any sort of entertainment business at all. And, he'll have a mantra that says never say never. And, along with the comments that we've heard recently from Dana White, considering, the aggression in which he's come after you with his words, and like you were saying here earlier in the beginning part of that question that the Scum had for you, is that you give your opinion and you're not afraid to back it up, whether it be verbally or physically. Given all that, would there ever be a chance, or could this ever happen, that the I'm coming comments and everything that comes with Dana White, would there ever be a chance that he'd step into the ring or the octagon with Ken Shamrock?
He wouldn't do that if his wife depended on it, which it would. He's again, like I said, it's not something that I would pursue, only because I am a UFC NHB no holds barred bare knuckle champion, okay, and I have proven myself in the ring. Dana White, this is what I want to say to the fans who like Dana, is that don't buy property in Florida when you don't know whether it's a flood zone or not. Because one thing, all you're doing is hearing somebody talk, telling you how good something is, and you haven't seen it yet. Would you put your money down on something you haven't seen? That's what I'm saying. Dana White has done nothing but talk about being a badass, challenging Tito Ortiz, and then when Tito Ortiz decided it wasn't a good business opportunity for him, all of a sudden he was afraid. This was one of the best light heavyweight champions in the world, And some of these fans are telling him he's afraid to fight Dana White. Really? Really? How ignorant is that? That's what just mind-boggling to me is how in the world did those words got out of someone's mouth about Dana White and Tito Ortiz? Tito Ortiz is afraid of Dana White? Really?
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds preposterous. I mean, I didn't even realize that had been said, but you would think, given Ortiz's background and everything that he's accomplished, I mean, for someone to say that would have to be completely ignorant to any of his background, I would think. But
would you be shocked on how many some of the fans out there who are saying how Dana White would whip somebody's ass or like he ain't afraid of nothing? And it's like I'm thinking to myself, you know, what are these people smoking? I mean, I'm a world champion, proven. Randy Couture is a proven world champion. Tito, my brother, and so on and so on. And yet Dana White stands up there and calls them these names? It's like, what kind of person does that? Oh, yeah, that's right. Those are those keyboard warriors.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. There sure are.
And Dana White's one of them. Dana White's the one that hides behind a microphone and behind a TV camera and spouts off and calls people names because he doesn't like what they have to say or he doesn't like their opinion. I've never been rude to Dana White. I have never called Dana White, well, I can't say never because I can't remember if I did or didn't, but I don't make it a practice or a habit of slinging bad names at Dana White or anybody else. I try to state an opinion. I try to make my point. Sometimes it might be one. It might even not even be right. I don't know. It's my opinion from what I see and what I feel. But if I am wrong, I've always said I'm listening.
Sure, and that's, you know, that's your word, and being a man with your word, I mean, you can respect the hell out of that. Absolutely. So Ken, we have one more question here for you. It's on UFC. It's to do with the UFC again, and then we wanted to give you a chance to relay whatever message you'd like to get out there to the fans, to each of these organizations, whatever, before we sign off. Lastly, though, it's been all over, much like the comments that we were just talking about, traded with involving Dana. That had to do, you know, with, like you were saying, very disrespectful towards your brother, towards Tito, towards yourself, towards others. So it's also been said that there was a possible plan in the works at some point, at least from what I had read, and I'm sure you could speak to this better than I could, that yourself, Frank, Tito, Rampage Jackson, Randy, who you just spoke of, there was a possible plan for you guys to show at the 20th anniversary UFC show. I believe it was 167. Is that an idea? Where did that idea come about? Is there any truth to that idea, and is there still a chance of something like that happening? And hypothetically, if it did, what would you foresee happening there?
Well, first of all, it was brought to my attention through a friend of ours, J.T. Walsh, Inner Circle Promotions, and it was actually more of the grounds of us going so that we can actually show our support to the UFC fighters and to the UFC fans. And it had nothing to do with Dana White. It had to do with us trying to figure out if how we could get there, if it would be, you know, good for us to go and show our support. But then Dana turned it into something that it's not, which is, you know, 4 superheroes coming to save the day. You know, that's just not how it is. It was for us personally to be able to show our support and our consideration for the things that we have done and for the consideration of the fans who helped us get to where we were at. The problem with it now is just becoming this, you know, this vendetta or something that Dana White wants it to be, and that's not how it was meant to be. It was just meant to show support, a sign of support. And, you know, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, we'll see. I know with me, I have an obligation, which was already planned, you know, 6 months ago. So I'm still working on trying to see whether or not I can get out of that obligation to go. And if I do, like I said, I want the fans to know, man, it is nothing. That's not who we are. Dana White does not have anything to do with none of us when it comes to us wanting to support MMA, period. He doesn't have a say on that.
Yeah, well, again, that's nice to hear, to clear the air, because, you know, it makes sense. You read what you read, like you said, keyboard warriors or what have you. And really what it boils down to is a bunch of legends looking to go and be there for the fans and to support the guys that are up there battling. And really what it's read is exactly what you said. The way I had read it, the way I took it, so I'm glad for you to clear the air on that, is it kind of sounded like it was some kind of vendetta. You're right. It's in reality, it's a fantastic idea for some of the all-time greats to kind of give back to the fans and show their support.
Well, we have to do that because the UFC's not. They're not bringing guys in like Gary Goodrich or Kevin Rozier or Zane Frazier or Gerard Godot, or, all the guys that helped this thing go. When it was bare knuckle, no rules, we fought 4 times in one night. And there's absolutely no sign of respect from the UFC. They're not even mentioned on this 20-year anniversary. Not a mentioning of it. And to me, that is so disrespectful for these guys. One of them is in a retirement home. The other one's got brain damage. You got some of these guys that are struggling to make their lives meet. It's sickening to not even show a sign of respect for the guys that made it real.
No, that's a great point. And you have mentioned this now a couple times in our interview, and I specifically as a fan. Right when it first started of MMA and the tournaments, you were talking about 4 times in one night. And folks, if you hadn't seen some of the early events that were put on pay-per-view, it was basically 8 or 16-man tournament all in one night. So your performer would go out and fight 4 times. There wasn't any weight classes. So, and I can remember specifically there was a guy that had to have weighed 500 pounds in the ring with a guy of your stature, Ken. I would say I think you fought the light heavyweight, so that's like 205. So you got a guy that's like 500 pounds fighting a guy that's 200 pounds. It was complete barbaric, just savagery, and you succeeded. And now we have, we have the evolution of MMA is now very rigid, very strict, and there's people that paid their dues and certainly are like in retirement homes now, like you said, that aren't even noticed at all that help put UFC on the map. So as a fan of somebody that's been watching it pretty much since its inception, very interesting comments there. Now, myself and the Scum wanted to give you an opportunity just to give you the mic. The mic is yours. Give you a chance to reach out to whoever you want to speak to, the fans, to Vince McMahon, to Paul Levesque, to Dixie Carter, Jeff Jarrett, Dana White, whomever you want to speak to, Ken, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I want to go by saying, I thank God for all the opportunities that I have. I thank my fans who have supported me over the years, and I thank the fans for whoever they supported and the support they've given the organizations. May God bless you. The second thing is it is so important. It is so important that I make it real for the fans, that I help the fans really understand that it's the entertainment for you. It's your money that you're spending to be entertained. You have a voice in this. Don't let these promoters bully you around, make you buy into these angles or buy into these fights that you particularly don't want. If there's something that, on a whole, that most of the fans want to see, speak your mind. Make these people listen to you. You are the ones that are putting money in their pockets. If you feel like they're not listening and giving you the things that you want, then take a stand. That's how this world was built, by people taking a stand. And I ask you now as fans, you guys have an opportunity to take a stand. If you see something wrong, and especially what's going on with fighter pay, especially what's going on in the WWE. If you're not being heard, make them hear you. Stand together. Stand as one and be heard as one. God bless.
Absolutely. Well, Ken, you said that, you put your faith in God in a lot of things and that things will play out how he would like to see them, so to speak. And, hey, maybe this interview catches the right ear. Maybe, somebody stumbles across it the right. Maybe you get that call. Hopefully we see you back involved in some way. I know that both.
Well, let me clarify that too. Let me make sure I make it really clear. I want an opportunity to be able to get back in the ring and finish a journey that I once started and fell short. If I get that opportunity, I would very much appreciate it. If I don't, I'm still very much appreciative of everything that I've gotten up to this point. But I will say this. Listen to what people want. You can't give everything to them, but at least have an ear. And it doesn't matter whether it's in TNA or Ring of Honor or WWE. I am available and willing, and I do have the ability.
Yeah, well, you said you're very appreciative of the fans. We're very appreciative of you coming back on here with us and setting the record straight on some of these things. Like you had alluded to, like we always allude to on the show, some of the stuff that you read, some of the stuff that you say, we try to bring it right from the horse's mouth, so to speak, right from the performers who are involved. And you clarified a lot of those points, and we really appreciate it. We appreciate you coming back on here, and we certainly wish you the best of luck with everything that your endeavors here coming up, whatever they may wind up being. We certainly want to give you our best wishes.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and listen, whatever happens, it truly has been an experience. It's been real good, and I tell you, the one thing I'll never, ever be able to replace is the opportunity to be able to meet and greet all the people who supported me. I got an opportunity to travel a lot. I got an opportunity to meet a lot of interesting people, and for that, I'm truly blessed.
That's awesome stuff. Folks, Ken Shamrock, once again, thanks so much for joining us, Ken. Have a great night, and hopefully we'll be seeing you in the marquee very soon.
And also, too, remember, it's Shamrock Ken at Twitter.
That's right, at Shamrock Ken on Twitter. We got you all set. I know that WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum, we follow you. We know that's your legit Twitter handle, so we'll make sure we get that message out there to everybody.
Thank you so much, man. You guys have a blessed day.
Okay, you too, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, and if you want to get your money's worth, then you got to stay right here with WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum.
Well, I don't know about you, Scum, but there's not much that we can say that's going to overpower what Ken Shamrock had to say on our special tonight, man.
Absolutely not. I mean, hey, we told you we were going to try and deliver some clarity on those issues. Say that was pretty crystal clear, wouldn't you, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're doing this, and we do a lot of stuff, recorded. We're amateurs, man. We're fans. Sometimes we got to do things twice, sometimes 3-4 times. This is a one-take deal tonight, folks. WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum Special Edition. Some very interesting comments, and I found it to be very funny that he understands the difference between someone that's a legit guy that has, a real point of view and a keyboard warrior.
Absolutely. The keyboard warrior strikes again. You'll have to excuse the pun when I say this, but you know that the Scum wouldn't be the Scum if he didn't allude to this here, Steve. Blackballed is a term that Ken Shamrock has used and alluded to and explained here today, but would you say that maybe the wrestling industry has feeded the man a proverbial shit sandwich?
Oh, man, I'll tell you that I actually had that written down, and I was about to say the same thing. He saves a guy like Mark Henry, who, ironically enough, is still in the industry and still works for WWE, and he's one of the longest tenured performers they got. The guy's been around since the mid-'90s. Saves the guy from an absolute disgusting practical joke, and I'm a practical joker. I will fuck with people, for lack of a better term, just because it's kind of fun and, living the fraternity days, playing pranks on each other at the house and stuff. I mean, those, like he said, there's ribbing and there's having fun, and then there's defecating into a man's food. And, to me, that takes it a little bit too far. So basically, he saved Mark Henry. He might have saved someone's life because, for what it's worth, Ken Shamrock, maybe the world's most dangerous man, he got that moniker for a reason. But so did Mark Henry. He got the world's strongest man for a reason. The guy is the size of a small planet, and he would definitely jack someone's teeth up. So he saves whomever from a guaranteed concussion by telling the guy, what they did to him, what the kind of rib they played on him, and then gets blackballed for it.
Well, Steve, again, I'll silly sense of humor that I have aside, I mean, like you said, I mean, that there's Practical Joker, and I got the most twisted sense of humor that you'll ever find. You can vouch for that, but I mean, not only is that taken a little bit too far, I mean, like you said, I would imagine Mark Henry could kick somebody's ass. So I would think that he not only saved Mark Henry from, at bare minimum, an illness of some sort. I mean, I don't know exactly. I have never personally dabbled in eating feces in any manner, but I would imagine that it can't be very good for the immune system.
Keep going.
I would imagine that it can't be very good for you. I mean, in any way, shape. I mean, nothing good can come of it. I mean, there's one thing. There's hiding somebody's. I mean, there's even like, if you need to go that route, fill somebody's boot or their cowboy hat or something. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a story years gone by of the classic rib on the King Jerry Lawler, where I think the people passed around shit in his crown or something because he was acting like he was higher than thou. I know that's a story that's been passed around, but it wasn't like Lawler would have saw that and been pissed, but it wouldn't have been like entering his body.
Yeah, I hear you 100%. And you know, like you said, there are millions of rib stories. I mean, geez, there's stories that go back to, like rib stories, kind of like the Rougeau brothers and the British Bulldog and Davey Boy Smith Dynamite Kid. That legendary scene where, Dynamite gets jacked up by the Rougeau brothers because of a plank gone bad. Things like that, they kind of happen when you basically hang out with a bunch of jocks in a locker room for 20 years. I mean, that's just what happens. It's part of, the culture of being an athlete. You hang out in a towel in your locker room with a bunch of other dudes. They're bound to fuck with each other. I mean, that's just part of, being a male or even females. They get into it. But, there's a certain line, and I guess, and he made mention of it. He's like, what was Hunter going to do? Like, mess with me? He's like, I'll kill him. Now, if that's the whole story, okay, we'll never know. We're going to get Ken Shamrock on the line. Chances are we're not going to get John Paul Levesque or Trips or whatever you want to call this guy. You're not going to get him on here to talk with us and rebut. So we can only go by the information that we have, and that information is very simple. I stopped Mark Henry from eating a sandwich with shit in it, and they basically tried to ruin my career.
Right. Well, yeah, and again, that is certainly something that I'm pretty sure you heard here first on WGD Weekly. I always say you learn something new every week. Well, this is midweek, and this is a special edition, but you learned something new. That you wanted to know what he meant by blackballed. There you have it. Flying, vibrant color, and Steve, not to get off topic here with such a shocking story as that he laid into, but, some of the other stuff that he said, just very passionate, very pointed at the different things that he had to say. It sounds like with the WWE.com piece, I knew that just in speaking with Ken Shamrock recently and everything that he's been putting out there, like when we talked earlier today, there's no way that he didn't say, yeah, I'd like to finish that journey. How many times did he say, I'd like to finish that journey, and that's what they leave out of there? I mean, I just don't get it. So maybe his options are, maybe TNA, like he said, Jeff Jarrett was trying to help him with the Twitter deal that he was going through. Maybe TNA is a viable option. I mean, when we talked WWE, it seemed like he was talking more pointed at the people who were trying to close him out. He said he spoke with Shane McMahon, who put a call in for him, and it was ignored. I mean, but it sounded like Jeff Jarrett was willing to help. It's rather than talking why he thinks he was left out in the cold, so to speak, by WWE. When we talk TNA, he talked with passion about Kurt Angle. How about a submission match? How about the ankle lock? When we talk Ring of Honor, and again, I know he refereed a match there probably 10, 11 years ago. I don't think he had much to do there, but again, I didn't know what his take was on Ring of Honor, but yeah, it's extreme. It sounds good. Ken Shamrock could be a great tool, not only for a name for Ring of Honor, but to help out with the young guys, right?
Oh, completely. I certainly agree with what you're saying here, Scum. And a couple of things I pulled out of this interview tonight, WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scummy, a special edition with Ken Shamrock coming back on our show. A couple of things that pulled out for me. And again, you mentioned you touched on one there where he had that great idea. What a good match that would be to watch Kurt Angle and Ken Shamrock lock up in the squared circle, only way you're going to win is to get the other guy to tap out to an ankle lock. What a great angle. Like, that could be, you could play that out on television for about 6 weeks leading up to a big event, and it would be very compelling to watch that storyline unveiled. Another thing that I really kind of appreciated coming from a guy that has spent so much time at the top of his game. He was a UFC champion, he's Intercontinental champion. We've gone through his resume. But not only does he want to make a return to WWE, that aside, he's going to go back to WWE in his mind to win the World Heavyweight Championship. He's not back there to be like a mid-card guy or an ambassador or a guy that signs autographs at an Access before WrestleMania. He wants to go back to WWE to finish some unfinished business in his mind, and that's to win the World Wrestling Entertainment Championship belt, which is very interesting. So he doesn't want to go in kind of halfway. He doesn't want to go to be a goodwill ambassador. He wants to go in there, put on a great show for the fans, and win the title. So I thought that it just in itself is motivation. Not only do I want to go, I want to be the best. I want to be at the apex of the company. So maybe that, and again, now, if you're looking at it from a business standpoint, Vince McMahon or Paul Levesque, whatever they're looking at, that maybe that could be kind of a stumbling block. And another thing that I kind of picked up, and I may be wrong on this, because we're just talking on the phone, spitballing here with Ken Shamrock tonight at WGD Weekly, and I may be wrong about this, but I almost got kind of a vibe, so to speak, that he would certainly go back to TNA, and he would probably take a look at Ring of Honor. But I really, really think that in his motivation is to get back into the ring in Connecticut with WWE, and I think he wants a piece of Triple H, and I think he wants a piece of that World Heavyweight Championship.
Steve, I agree with you, but almost unlike our first interview with him, where he was saying that with WWE, and he said, I thought we had. I believe what he said the first time go around was, I don't know. I think that there maybe is some bad blood there with Hunter, but, I thought we were okay. Whereas after reaching out and with the fans reaching out through Twitter and retweeting what he's been saying, this or that, it almost seemed like with the WWE.com piece not mentioning him wanting to do a comeback, the reason that I was kind of leaning, I think you're 100% spot on when you say he first and foremost, he would love to be back in WWE. He'd love to have that run at the title. But if you notice when he talked about the opponents there that we brought up, Triple H or Brock Lesnar, unlike where he talked a submission match with Angle, unlike where and I thought this was a huge compliment, because if you remember how highly he talked to that Bret Hart, Steve Austin WrestleMania match in the last interview, he spoke about how he thought that changed the business, how it made it more real and everything. And he compared watching Ring of Honor, which he said he's been watching recently, to that match. So I think that he's high on that as well. But unlike where he talked Ring of Honor and TNA, where he talked the wrestling product, when Triple H was brought up and when Brock Lesnar was brought up, he didn't seem to be talking a wrestling match. He seemed like he was talking, I'd love to get Hunter in the ring and show him exactly what I am. He said, Brock Lesnar, the difference is I'm a bare-knuckle fighter, and I will go in there and I will, you know what I'm saying? So it almost seemed to be that he's so frustrated and disappointed, like he said, with the fact that for whatever reason they won't even answer what he's trying to say with them, that, it obviously I think that would be his number one choice, but he just seems really disappointed with the fact that he's not even getting a, well, hey, Ken, we've thought it out. We're going to go this way or something. He just has been getting nuts. So I think that with the other companies, he talked more like, yeah, I could see working with Angle or Ring of Honor. That product is extreme, So I just think that I think he's extremely disappointed with the fact that he's almost forgotten in the world of WWE.
That's a safe assessment. I could agree with that 100%. And you touched on a point, and as you were talking, I was kind of thinking along the same lines where I bet you Ken Shamrock seems to be the type of guy that takes no for an answer, man to man.
Yeah,
so
I would say.
If you just simply said, Ken, it's not going to work, here's what we can offer you.
Sure.
There's no, there are people, and again, we're not going to get into names, and we talk about not speaking about the storylines and the internal workings and the hidden mechanisms of what's going on in the current product. It's unavoidable to speak about the current product in this particular capacity, but I think we all know if we watch the weekly product, I can probably think of 3/4 of the roster I would rather see Ken Shamrock get in the ring with instead of, the people that are out there now.
Sure. I agreed. See, it doesn't make much sense. And again, when you have the people, not only do you have the supporters, obviously you have the people out there responding to the, our last interview and different things. You have the people that don't agree, and you're entitled to your opinion. If you think Ken would be, too old maybe to come back, or some people are going to say that, and that's their opinion. They're entitled to it. Again, but you have. To me, or to you, I just don't understand where you wouldn't want that. It seems like people are so driven to, jump on something in a negative manner just to say it. Like, did a lot of these people, did they watch 97 to 99 when Ken Shamrock was in WWE? Because he was a hell of a worker. I mean, he had some great spots. I mean, I always enjoyed, he was talking about he was almost talking in storyline, so to speak, when he was speaking about the matches with The Rock, and if he would have had Brat or Michaels or Stone Cold in his corner, you know what I mean? But him and The Rock, those were great matches when they were doing the three-ways with The Rock and Mankind and Shamrock, and they had the cage match at that one in your house. He was a great worker. And even when it into 99, when he got the Intercontinental title, and he was feuding with Billy Gunn and Val Venus and people like that, he legitimately, he was a great match. I mean, he was believable. He was real. I just don't see where being that with the rigorous training that the man is in, training other people, staying in the great shape, I don't see where he would fall into that category as someone who's just old and, wouldn't go out there and be able to pull it off. I just can't imagine that. The guy's a machine. He always has been. He has been his entire life. We've gotten the story from him, Again, not to move along before we sign off here, Steve, but some of the MMA stuff, again, when we're talking, people with their own opinion, and you had made reference to a term that he used, the keyboard warrior and stuff. Again, we asked the question when we prepared it about him and Ortiz and his brother and Rampage and Couture going to the UFC 20th anniversary, because it read all over the place like they were going there to mess the thing up or something. And there it is again, just like we say on the weekly program. No, they wanted to go there for the fans. They wanted to go there and say hello to the fans and say thanks. They wanted to show support for the young Lions out there that are out there giving their all now. But if you read that anywhere across the internet, it reads like they were going to show up in some time looking for a fight or something, right?
Right. Well, yeah, you're completely right. And there's a couple of points I wanted to make off of what you were just saying. What is a guy from the Monday Night Wars? Who is a guy that stood out among many others that everybody said, this guy got hand-fed everything and he doesn't appreciate the business?
I don't know. A lot of guys come.
Got thrust right into the spotlight, never lost a match.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I would have to go with would be Goldberg. I'm not sure if that's who you're right.
Yeah, he's exactly who I'm talking about.
Okay.
So there's a guy that gets, all this adulation and all this, that, and the other thing, and he got walked right. He got spoon-fed to the top without ever having paid his dues. And there's a lot of guys out there that really resent him for that. Ken Shamrock, on the other hand, on our show tonight, actually talked about that and understood the value there. And you know why he understands the value of paying your dues? Because he was in a cage fighting a guy with like a club, like with one boxing glove on and like one like moon boot on. That was the most barbaric fighting tournament I've ever seen, and I loved it because it was straight out of a movie. I don't know if you've ever had the chance yourself, Scum, to go watch not the UFC as we know it, pay-per-views 1, 2, and 3, but like I think it was actually called UFC though. So UFC 1 through maybe 5 were those tournaments with guys like Ken Shamrock. I think Royce Gracie won one. Maybe Oleg Taktarov, the Russian Sambo wrestling guy, I think he won one. And that's right around when Dan Severn was coming in. Then he had a rivalry with another guy who looked like a mini version of Dan Severn called Don Fry. Now, these guys are legitimately kicking the fuck out of each other. Okay,
yes,
so
Steve, I remember. Yes. I mean, I always was watching those. Yeah, I mean, that's Ken Shamrock, again, to the majority, to the masses, to most people, that's what they think of when they think of Ken Shamrock. They don't think of the 2-3 year run in WWE. They think of Ken Shamrock, the absolute warrior in the octagon that was out there that, again, like he said, made millions for the UFC. Was maybe their most recognizable guy, dare I say, ever. I mean, Hollywood Hogan used to come out on Nitro and call himself the Babe Ruth of wrestling. Ken Shamrock could very easily become the Babe Ruth of UFC. Or at bare minimum, the Hulk Hogan of UFC.
Yeah, I mean, there's a legit argument with Royce Gracie because like half the performers in mixed martial arts now, half the fighters, I shouldn't say performers when we're talking about MMA, those guys are actually using a form of Gracie jiu-jitsu in one capacity or another. So yeah, your point is well taken, and it's absolutely right. Ken Shamrock, Royce Gracie, easily the godfathers of mixed martial arts. There's no other way to look at it. Those guys were bloodying people long before this ever became a huge popular thing to watch and when it was more of a blood sport. But something else I wanted to touch on, Scum, is that Ken Shamrock, and again, we're spitballing here. I don't know. I guess he's probably going to be in his 50s, right?
Sure,
he's in his 50s. He's this, that. Okay, let's take a timeout right there because Ken Shamrock's 50 is a lot of people's 20 as far as physical condition. And there are 70-plus-year-old performers out there now. We won't name any names, but they literally need to still work. Actually can. Right. What you going to do? I don't know. How old is he? He's got to be in his late 60s, Hogan, right? There's people out there, and some guy, some keyboard warrior is going to be like, oh, how dare you talk about Ken Shamrock and Hulk Hogan in the same sentence. I'm not saying that Ken Shamrock's wrestling career was in any way, shape, or form on the level of Hulk Hogan's. I'm talking actual reality. You want to go see a guy that's maybe 52, 53 years old that's still got, six-pack abs and is still in perfect condition, get in the ring and bring it, whether he wins or loses, or do you want to watch some slob drag his freaking half-drunk ass out to the ring? Which one do you want to see, Scum?
Sure. Hey, Steve, you make very valid points, my man. And I know we're running out of time here. I know we got to sign off here shortly. But, I wanted to put out there exactly what you're saying. And again, with the woo and with what you're going to do, there's nobody that's a bigger fan of Ric Flair's work over the years than you and myself. Hulk Hogan, same thing. Hats off to him. Again, the comparison there, just again, for the listener, is made right now, today, we're talking about. And the physical condition of these guys that are still putting themselves out there comparatively to Ken Shamrock. And again, nobody is saying that Ken Shamrock is in their league when it comes to the longevity and the overall their spot in professional wrestling. Make no mistake about it. With the MMA stuff that we're talking about, we're a professional wrestling show. We're Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly. Yourself and I, we are no experts on the world of MMA, nor are we ever going to claim to be on the UFC, anything like that. However, given the subject matter here tonight, given the topics that we're put on, given the fact that we got an opinion just like you do, and to be honest with you, we do our homework, we do the best that we can to get it out there. The things that we were saying here and the things, take a look at it. I mean, take a look at the different things that were said. Before you go jumping in, like you said, how do you say that about Flair or Hogan, or how can you say this, how can you say that? We're talking today, right now, relevancy. Again, in the fact of the matter is that, the man is in good shape. He wants back. For whatever reason, he's not getting any type of response. For whatever reason, he obviously is very frustrated by it. And hey, like I said at the end of the interview to him, if this can hit the right ears, and all of a sudden you see Ken Shamrock in Ring of Honor, you see Ken Shamrock on Impact, hell, you see, like you just said, the bell toll and Ken Shamrock come out at the Royal Rumble or something, then it's all good. It's all worth it. So we're not necessarily experts here, like you said earlier, but we certainly do our homework. We certainly try to bring you the best that we can. And that being said, opinions are opinions, but it's hard to argue that Ken Shamrock, there's no way that the guy is not in tip-top shape and ready for a return.
Yeah, that's easily taken in by our interview tonight, Scum. You're absolutely right. Another world-famous tough guy once said, and I wonder what he would say about keyboard warriors, but I know Mike Tyson once said that, everybody's plans change once they get punched in the face. So, but very interesting to see what may be down the road for Ken Shamrock. We certainly wish him the best. Scum, like you said, it's been a good 60-minute Broadway, maybe a little bit of overtime as well. It's been one hell of a show. We wanted to thank you once again for listening. WGD Weekly Special Edition, Part 2 with Ken Shamrock. he certainly brought it better than, I've seen in a long time on this show. Real emotional, real heartfelt. Wanted to thank him once again for joining us, folks. At WGD Weekly on Twitter, WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum on Facebook. Leave your opinions as to what you think. Would you be interested in watching Ken Shamrock make a return? Where would you like to see him wrestle? Maybe over in WWE, TNA, of course, Ring of Honor. Got a bunch of different choices out there. We want to hear from you. After all, this is all for you guys to listen to. Thank you so much once again for listening. We're going to see you this Sunday. We got a special guest in store for you there, so don't miss it. Scum, it's been one hell of a night, man. You got anything to add before we sign off?
Absolutely. Some other big news to touch on this Sunday. Everybody tune in to our regular program, WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum. You can find us on YouTube at WGD Weekly. You can find us on iTunes under the same. On our Facebook page, WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum. Or, of course, over at Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. Big announcement, Steve. Big iron in the fire about our special 25th episode of the program with huge news on a big giveaway that you do not want to miss out on. And you know what I'm talking about, my friend. Between this interview this week, the follow-up with Ken Shamrock, with the big news about the 25th show, and our huge guest that'll be on this weekend, safe to say, as always, Steve and the Scum, WGD Weekly, Scum Nation, the latest sensation sweeping the internet wrestling community and the wrestling radio nation, baby.
That is some fantastic stuff. Scum, I'm going to have to tell you, I don't know if you've enlightened me or not yet as to who our special guest is this weekend. I'm very interested to know who it is.
Well, we'll just have to tune in and find out, I suppose, my friend.
Hey, we'll be here then Sunday afternoon. Don't miss it. We're going to have one hell of a guest. Scum's not even going to let me know who it is, so the camera and the microphone is wearing a mask. I have no idea who it is or where it came from. Oh, boy, that's some fantastic stuff. Well, you never know who you're going to get here at WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum. Thanks once again so much for joining us. We're going to sign off for now, but we'll see you on Sunday. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you then.
Have a good week, people.